AITA for not spending this Christmas in the hospital with my daughter? My 39F daughter, 16F, has had a sensitive stomach ever since she was a kid. There are certain foods that will upset her stomach to the point where she's unable to stop throwing up. We've seen countless doctors, but so far nobody's been able to give us a clear answer. The only advice we keep getting is to identify all trigger foods and cut them from her diet. We have a pretty good idea of what those foods are: soda and other carbonated drinks, chips, Cheetos, and other similar processed snacks, anything oily or fried, and most sweets. Unfortunately, this is exactly the kind of stuff my daughter loves to eat the most, and as horrible as she feels after she has them, she still refuses to cut them out of her diet, which in turn led to her spending a lot of time in the hospital during the past few years. When she was little, it was easier to keep all these foods away from her because I simply wouldn't buy them. But now that she's older, I can't always be there to check what she eats. She eats the greasy pizza at her school's cafeteria. She trades her lunch with her classmates. She goes out with her friends and stops to eat at KFC, and so on. And it always ends with her in the crying and shaking because she can't stop throwing up. This was the case on this Christmas Eve as well, when our whole family gathered at our place. And of course, among the many dishes at our Christmas table were some of her main trigger foods, like chips, soda, chocolate, and sweets. Now mind you, these were far from the only foods available to her. We also had a variety of home-cooked, traditional dishes on the table, with ingredients that don't upset her stomach, like vegetables, meat, dairy, etc. All of them delicious and well seasoned. My daughter herself says she really likes most of these dishes. Despite this, my daughter chose to eat nothing but her trigger foods. I reminded her that they'd make her feel awful, but she said she didn't care, because Christmas is only once a year and she just wants to live a little. Well, this ended with her violently throwing up in the a few hours later. She had to be hospitalized for a few days and only just got out of the hospital a few hours ago. And unlike all the previous times when something like this happened, this time I chose to spend my Christmas relaxing at home with the rest of our family, and not in the hospital by my daughter's side. I kept in touch with her through calls and texts, and told her that if she needed anything I'd ask a family member to bring it to her. But I made it clear that I would not be visiting her during her stay. And well, my daughter didn't take this too well. She cried every time we talked on the phone, begged me to come over, told me how horrible I was for abandoning her there all alone, and so on. Most of our family didn't take my side in this either. And during the past few days I got called everything from a little extreme to downright cruel and heartless. AITA. Reddit? This is going to be unpopular, I'm sure, but ever taken your kid to a psychiatrist? There's definitely some secondary gain going on here, and the kid needs to find alternative, pro-social and adaptive behaviors to cope. Info. Has she been to the therapy? She's engaging in self-harm behaviors, and that needs to be treated. NTA. She willingly did this to herself. She needs to recognize that actions have consequences, and you don't need to be there every single time she decides to harm herself. And yes, this can be considered self-harm because she is willingly hurting herself by eating these foods. If anything, I would have her start seeing a therapist to figure out what's going on and why she keeps self-harming. Info. I think is key to making a judgment. Do you have your daughter in therapy to help her manage her impulse control? She's 16, old enough to self-regulate her diet if it causes her severe issues. Nah, but get her into eating disorder related therapy. This is definitely in Ed territory, and because she knows the outcome. It's also self-harm. Edit. For those replying and messaging me about eating disorders, I'm in disbelief that so many people think of them as exclusively bulimia and/or anorexia. EDs are largely about impulse control. Not being able to control yourself around things you eat. This is disordered eating. She continues to repeatedly eat things that hurt her enough to warrant days-long stays at the hospital. She is knowingly hurting herself. NTA. Because of this, she said she didn't care. Because Christmas is only once a year and she just wants to live a little, but she eats the greasy pizza at her school's cafeteria. She trades her lunch with her classmates. She goes out with her friends and stops to eat at KFC and so on. And it always ends with her in the crying and shaking because she can't stop throwing up. This is not a moment of poor judgment because she is a teenager and it's Christmas. She does this regularly and doesn't care how it affects her or others. Now I say NTA because I understand it must be frustrating that your daughter doesn't care of her own health. But you really should talk to her and figure it out why she has no care at all for her own well-being. Good night. This is way above Reddit's pay grade. Your daughter's illness has obviously triggered disordered eating problems and psychological issues. This isn't the place to figure out any of that. Get her and you the help you all need. Babe, your daughter is self-harming. If she had cut herself to end up in the hospital, would you visit her? This may be above Reddit's pay grade. I understand your frustration, but she's still just a kid and not fully self-regulating. Therapy sounds like a good idea at this point. I can't imagine she enjoys being in the hospital puking her guts out. Something is going on. I'm very curious as to what exactly is prompting admission and hospitalization, particularly when hospitals are understaffed and beds are scarce. What are they doing for her? Is it uncontrollable pain that can only be managed with in-hospital pain meds? Is it intractable vomiting to the point where IV fluids are necessary? She cannot keep any oral fluids in? Vomiting alone is often manageable, if unpleasant, without an ED visit and admission. What's actually going on here? Admissions that last days? Info. Have you sought any counseling from a mental health professional for your daughter? I'm assuming insurance isn't an issue because there is nothing more expensive than the NTA. 16 is old enough to understand to not eat yourself to the hospital. Your daughter needs to see someone. Therapist or counseling. This isn't normal behavior. She's 16. Time to grow up. I'm coming down on NTA on this one. Your daughter is old enough to know what the effects of her actions are and old enough to take responsibility for them. By your description, it isn't like this is a one-off happening either. With her doing this after outings with friends. If this were the only time in the year, I think my answer might have been different. But she hasn't exactly been the model of restraint or discipline during the year. And her actions have a cost for the whole family. I don't understand. Where is the therapy? The nutritionist? Seriously. As a parent, you need to start fighting for your kid more with medical professionals. The 16-year-old didn't learn her whatever attitude from no one. This is like a severe nut allergy. Teach her to avoid at all costs. She should be smart enough to pick up what her doctor's and parents' approach is. YTA. And be careful. She may want to cut ties with you when she gets older, if she grows to think you don't care about her. By the way, if she cannot stop eating something that leads her to hospital every time and keeps saying she wants to be able to live a little, she may need to do therapy to confront her illness. YTA. She's 16. Hormonal, and you tell her she can't have food she loves. Then you have family over for Christmas dinner with all of those foods. My daughter has an eating disorder. Let's eat those foods in front of her. YTA. This sub shows the toxicity of Reddit. It's a perfect echo chamber for people like the op. Is this site just a magnet for products of broken homes? YTA for downplaying her condition and continuing to serve her trigger foods at events you host. My cousin is severely allergic to nuts and we never serve them even if we're hosting. For his well-being. You obviously don't care about your daughter's well-being. I have similar issues to your daughter. Non-stop vomiting episodes. Multi-$1,000 bills. The issue I'm having with your post is that a sensitive stomach is not a diagnosis. Sensitivities to processed food do not result in the severities you're describing. Your daughter has an unknown medical issue. And I'd suggest that since the vomiting is so severe, and obviously continues long past there is anything in her system to throw up, looking into diagnoses like Gilbert's disease. Good luck.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic AITA is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.